I'm Madison Wallace, 28, and I never imagined I'd be crying behind a marble pillar at my sister Lauren's wedding reception. The designer dress I'd spent 3 paychecks on was wasted as I sat hidden from view, watching the celebration through blurry tears. Then a warm hand touched mine. "This seat taken?" asked a voice. I looked up to see a handsome stranger in a tailored suit, extending a handkerchief. I had no idea then that accepting his hand would set off a chain of events that would expose my family's darkest secrets and change our lives forever. If you've ever had a family member betray you in the worst possible way, this story might hit close to home. I still get emotional sharing this journey, so I appreciate you being here with me today. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want more real family drama stories. Trust me, this wedding day nightmare has a twist you won't see coming. Lauren and I were inseparable growing up. Being 4 years older, she was my protector, my confidant, and my best friend. When our parents' marriage fell apart when I was 9 and Lauren was 13, we formed our own little support system. I remember the nights we'd build blanket forts in her bedroom and whisper our dreams until dawn, promising we'd always have each other's backs no matter what. When Mom forgot my science project at her apartment during custody transitions, Lauren stayed up all night helping me rebuild it. When Lauren had her first heartbreak at 16, I smuggled ice cream up to her room and let her cry on my shoulder. Our personalities were different but complementary. Lauren was always the ambitious one, with big plans and a magnetic personality. I was quieter, more content with simple pleasures and deep connections. We joked that she was the sparkler and I was the candle. She lit up a room instantly while I provided steady, lasting warmth. Things began to shift when Lauren went to college. She joined a prestigious sorority, and suddenly her social media was filled with new friends, exclusive parties, and a growing obsession with status. Her calls home became less frequent, and when we did talk, she seemed more interested in telling me about the important people she was meeting than asking about my life. I brushed it off as normal growing pains. After all, she was experiencing a whole new world. I chose a different path, attending our state university and pursuing my passion for early childhood education. By the time Lauren graduated with her business degree, we were operating in completely different spheres. She moved to the city and landed a job in luxury real estate, quickly climbing the ranks and building a network of wealthy clients. I started my career as a kindergarten teacher in our hometown, finding joy in finger paintings and helping little minds discover the world. Our mother, Diane, practically glowed with pride at Lauren's success. "Your sister closed a multi-million-dollar penthouse sale today," she'd announced during our Sunday phone calls, her voice brimming with admiration. When I shared stories about my students' achievements, her responses were polite but brief. "That's nice, honey. Did I tell you Lauren was featured in Real Estate Monthly?" Dad was different. Thomas Wallace, a high school history teacher who loved books and quiet weekends fishing, seemed to understand me in ways Mom never did. "Teaching is noble work, Maddie," he'd say. "You're shaping the future one child at a time." But even his support was passive. He never confronted Mom about her obvious favoritism or stood up to Lauren when she made dismissive comments about my career. Everything changed dramatically when Lauren met Richard Crawford 3 years ago. The heir to the Crawford Hotel Group, Richard was handsome, polished, and came from old money. From their first date, Lauren was smitten not just with him, but with the lifestyle he represented. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and with each passing month, I watched my sister transform further into someone I barely recognized. The Lauren who once spent weekends in pajamas watching movies with me now only wore designer clothes and talked about exclusive clubs and charity galas. Her voice developed an affected lilt, and she began using phrases like summer as a verb. When she visited home, she critiqued everything from Mom's furniture to my sensible car. "You could be so much more, Madison," she told me during one particularly painful lunch. "With your looks, if you just put in a little effort and moved to the city, you could meet someone worthwhile." The implication that my life choices weren't worthwhile stung deeply. Still, when Richard proposed with an obscenely large diamond after 18 months of dating, I genuinely tried to be happy for her. I accepted her request to be her maid of honor with tears of joy, believing this might bring us close again. I created Pinterest boards for bridesmaid dresses, researched bachelorette destinations within my budget, and blocked off every weekend for wedding preparations. But the wedding planning quickly became a series of humiliations. Lauren vetoed all my suggestions as basic or provincial. She scheduled dress fittings when she knew I was teaching and couldn't attend without calling in a substitute. When I finally managed to make time for a bridesmaid's lunch, I discovered she'd invited several women I'd never met, all from her new social circle, who exchanged knowing glances when I mentioned being a teacher. 6 months before the wedding, my boyfriend Kyle and I broke up after 3 years together. He claimed we were growing in different directions, but I later discovered he'd been seeing a pharmaceutical sales rep who drove a BMW and took regular trips to Aspen. The breakup left me heartbroken and would mean attending Lauren's wedding alone, something I was dreading. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything came to a head. I had driven 3 hours after school on a Friday to help Lauren with wedding favors. As I sat cross-legged on her luxury apartment floor, tying tiny ribbon bows, she looked down at me and sighed dramatically. "Madison, what are you wearing to the rehearsal dinner?" "That navy dress I showed you pictures of," I replied, focusing on the delicate ribbon. "The one with the lace sleeves." "From Target?" Lauren asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "You can't wear Target to the Crawford Club. Richard's entire extended family will be there." "It's a nice dress, Lauren," I defended myself. "And it's what I can afford on a teacher's salary." Lauren took a deep breath, as if summoning patience for a difficult child. "That's exactly what I'm talking about, Madison. This lack of ambition. You could do so much more with your life than shape Play-Doh and wipe runny noses, but you seem content to just settle." The words hit me like a slap. Tears sprang to my eyes as years of accumulated hurt bubbled to the surface. "Not everyone measures success by their bank account or social status, Lauren. I love my job. I'm making a difference in children's lives. And that's commendable in theory," she said with artificial sweetness. "But in reality, you're still driving the same car from college, living in a tiny apartment, and now you're single again because Kyle obviously wanted more." I stood up, ribbons falling from my lap. "You know what? I don't have to sit here and be insulted. I've bent over backwards trying to be supportive despite how you've treated me." "I'm just being honest," Lauren said coolly. "As your sister, I think someone needs to give you a wake-up call." I left that night instead of staying the weekend as planned. Despite the fight, I still harbored hope that we could mend things before the wedding. I sent a text apologizing for walking out, though I wasn't the one who should have been apologizing. Lauren responded with a brief, "It's fine. Just be at the final dress fitting next Saturday." Little did I know, that argument was just the beginning of what would become the most painful and ultimately transformative weekend of my life. The morning of Lauren's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that seemed to mock my internal turmoil. Despite our fight, I arrived at the luxury hotel venue at 7 a.m., as requested, garment bag containing my bridesmaid dress slung over my shoulder. I'd spent weeks dieting to fit into the size Lauren had insisted on ordering, despite my protests that it was too small. The bridal suite was already buzzing with activity. Hairstylists and makeup artists flitted around, and several bridesmaids lounged in matching silk robes, champagne flutes in hand. Lauren sat in the center, looking radiant but tense. When she spotted me, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Madison," finally, she said, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "We started mimosas without you." "I'm exactly on time," I pointed out, forcing brightness into my voice. "The email said 7. Whatever. Your makeup slot is in 20 minutes. Did you bring the emergency kit I asked for?" I nodded, pulling out the bag of supplies I'd assembled. Fashion tape, extra earring backs, mints, and all the other items Lauren had demanded. I'd spent hours hunting down specific brands of blotting papers and particular bobby pins that didn't leave creases. I handed the bag to Lauren's friend Bethany, who I recognized from college, but who now acted as if we'd never spent a semester sharing late-night pizza and complaining about calculus. "Your hair looks interesting," Lauren commented as I hung up my dress. Did you actually get it done professionally like I asked? Yes, yesterday afternoon, I said, touching the carefully arranged curls I'd slept awkwardly to preserve. At Salon Verde, where you made the appointment. Lauren exchanged a look with Jacqueline, Richard's sister, whom I'd only met twice before. The two had become thick as thieves since the engagement, despite having nothing in common besides a love for expensive handbags. Ladies, Lauren suddenly announced, standing up dramatically. I have an announcement to make. The room quieted as everyone turned to Lauren. She was always one for theatrics, and I assumed this would be some emotional speech about friendship or a surprise gift for her bridesmaids. Instead, she turned to face me directly. Madison, I know we've had our issues lately, and I've been thinking a lot about what's best for my special day. The truth is, I'm worried you're not in the right headspace to handle maid of honor duties. The room went silent. I felt blood rushing to my face as every pair of eyes fixed on me. What are you talking about? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. You've been so emotional lately, especially since Kyle left, Lauren continued, her voice dripping with false concern. The maid of honor has so many responsibilities, and I don't want to overwhelm you. So Jacqueline has kindly agreed to step in. Jacqueline stepped forward with a practiced, sympathetic smile. I'm happy to help, Madison. No hard feelings. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't just a last-minute change of roles. Lauren had clearly been planning this for some time. Jacqueline already had the special maid of honor robe. The other bridesmaids averted their eyes, some looking genuinely uncomfortable while others poorly concealed their satisfaction at my public humiliation. You're still a bridesmaid, of course, Lauren added quickly, just without all the pressure. Before I could respond, Mom burst into the room carrying a box of hair accessories. She took in the scene, me standing shell-shocked, while the other women watched like spectators at a particularly juicy tennis match. What's going on? She asked, looking between Lauren and me. I've asked Jacqueline to be my maid of honor instead of Madison, Lauren explained smoothly. Madison's been having a rough time lately, and I thought this would actually be a kindness. I expected, hoped, that Mom would defend me. Instead, she nodded as if this made perfect sense. That's probably for the best, honey, she agreed, then turned to me. Madison, don't make a scene. This is your sister's special day. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Excuse me, I managed to say before locking myself in the bathroom, where I spent 10 minutes silently crying and splashing cold water on my face. When I emerged, determined to maintain at least a shred of dignity, the photographer had arrived and was arranging the bridal party for pre-ceremony photos. Oh, Madison, we're doing just the bridesmaids and maid of honor now, the photographer called out when I approached the group. Lauren said you'd help steam her veil instead, and so it continued throughout the morning. I was shuttled away from group activities, given menial tasks, and effectively erased from what should have been important moments. When it came time for the ceremony, I discovered I'd been reseated. Not with the bridal party, but in the back row of the bride's side, behind several distant relatives and Lauren's former roommate's parents. The ceremony itself was lavish and impeccably executed. Lauren floated down the aisle on our father's arm, the embodiment of bridal perfection in her custom designer gown. Dad caught my eye as they passed my row, and I detected a flicker of apology in his expression. But he said nothing, continuing his role in the perfectly choreographed production. During the reception line, I plastered on a smile and hugged my sister mechanically when my turn came. You look beautiful, Lauren, I said truthfully. Thanks, she replied distantly, already looking past me to the next guest. Richard barely acknowledged me with a curt nod. The real blow came when I entered the reception hall. A stunning ballroom with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and elaborately set tables surrounding a spacious dance floor. I searched for my name on the seating chart, finally locating Madison Wallace at table 19. Following the numbering system, I walked farther and farther from the head table, eventually finding myself in a corner of the ballroom where table 19 stood completely obscured behind a massive marble pillar. My table companions were an elderly great-aunt with hearing issues, the teenage son of Richard's colleague who spent the entire time on his phone, and two empty seats. From my position, I could see nothing of the dance floor or head table unless I physically stood up and leaned awkwardly around the pillar. After the bridal party entrance and first dance, which I witnessed by standing against the wall with other overlooked guests, I returned to my isolated seat. As I picked at my salmon, Lauren made her way around the room, stopping at every table to greet guests, except mine. When I finally intercepted her near the restrooms, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Why am I seated behind a pillar, Lauren?" I asked quietly, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I can't even see anything." Lauren's perfect makeup couldn't hide her flash of irritation. "We needed to seat you somewhere, Madison. And frankly, I didn't want your obvious jealousy ruining my photos." She glanced over my shoulder, and her expression brightened instantly. "Congressman Williams, so glad you could make it." She brushed past me as if I were a stranger. I stood there, crushed by the casual cruelty of someone I'd once trusted implicitly. My father appeared beside me, having witnessed the exchange. "I'm sorry, Maddie," he said quietly, squeezing my hand. "You know how your sister gets when she's stressed." "This isn't stress, Dad," I replied, fighting back tears. "This is who she is now." He had no response to that, and after a moment of awkward silence, he was called away by my mother to meet some important friend of the Crawfords. I returned to my pillar, slumped into my seat, and finally let the tears fall as the celebration continued without me, completely hidden from view. Through tear-blurred vision, I watched the reception unfold from my isolated vantage point, feeling like a ghost at a party celebrating my own family's betrayal. The band played Lauren's favorite songs. Laughter and conversation swirled throughout the ballroom, and champagne flowed freely, except at my forgotten table where the elderly great-aunt had nodded off and the teenager continued his digital isolation. I was dabbing at my mascara with a cocktail napkin when a warm voice startled me. "This seat taken?" I looked up to find a tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit gesturing to one of the empty chairs at my desolate table. His kind eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as he smiled, and he held out a proper handkerchief, an actual cloth one with embroidered edges. "I think you need this more than I do," he said gently. "Thank you," I managed, accepting the handkerchief. And no, apparently no one important enough was available to fill these seats. He laughed, a genuine warm sound that somehow lightened the atmosphere around our hidden table. "Mind if I upgrade your table status then?" Without waiting for an answer, he pulled out the chair next to mine and sat down. "Noah Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "Madison Wallace," I replied, taking his hand briefly. "Sister of the bride, though you'd never know it." "I know it," he said surprisingly. "I've been watching you all day." My guard immediately went up. "That's not creepy at all," I said, pulling my hand back. He laughed again. "Fair enough. Let me rephrase. I noticed how the bride's sister somehow wasn't in any of the photos, wasn't sitting with the family, and ended up behind this architectural feature." He knocked lightly on the pillar. "It seemed unusual." "And you are? What exactly?" "Wedding security monitoring for unusual behavior?" "Distant connection to the groom," he said vaguely. "Richard and I have some mutual business interests. But honestly, I'm mostly here because these kinds of events are good for networking." He loosened his tie slightly. "Though I'd much rather be catching a baseball game or trying that new ramen place downtown." Despite my suspicion, I found myself relaxing. There was something refreshingly authentic about Noah that contrasted sharply with the carefully curated personas filling the rest of the ballroom. "So, Madison Wallace, sister of the bride and—" He trailed off, raising an eyebrow in question. "Kindergarten teacher," I supplied, waiting for the usual, polite but dismissive response this revelation typically earned at Lauren's social gatherings. Instead, Noah's face lit up. "No way! That has to be simultaneously the most rewarding and most exhausting job on the planet. My sister's a second-grade teacher, and the stories she tells about classroom life are better than any reality TV. For the first time that day, perhaps the first time in months, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. It is pretty amazing, I admitted. Exhausting? Yes. But there's nothing like watching a child's face when they finally figure out how to read their first word. I bet, Noah said. And unlike the hollow responses I was used to, he seemed genuinely interested. What made you choose teaching? As dinner progressed, Noah and I talked about everything from favorite books to worst travel experiences. He told me about growing up in Boston with three sisters, his rescue dog named Pickle, and his work as an architect specializing in sustainable urban design. I shared stories about my most memorable students, my dream of eventually opening a progressive preschool, and my collection of vintage children's books. "So what's the deal with you and the bride?" he finally asked, after we'd both declined the rubbery wedding cake. Family drama isn't usually this blatant. I hesitated, wondering how much to reveal to this stranger. Something about his direct gaze made me feel I could trust him, which was ridiculous given we'd only just met. "My sister and I used to be close," I said carefully. "But people change, I guess." "Some people change," Noah corrected. "Others just reveal who they've been all along when the circumstances allow it." His insight hit uncomfortably close to home. I'd been telling myself for years that Lauren had changed, that the sister who once held my hand through thunderstorms and fiercely defended me against playground bullies couldn't possibly be the same person who had deliberately isolated and humiliated me today. "You seem to have some experience with that," I observed. Noah smiled ruefully. "Let's just say I understand family complications. My father and I have fundamentally different views on what constitutes success and ethical business practices." He glanced toward the head table where Richard was charming a group of older guests. "Your new brother-in-law and his family represent a lot of what I consider problematic in our industry." Before I could ask what he meant, the band switched to a slow song. Noah stood and held out his hand. "What do you say we make the best of this awful seating arrangement and dance? From this angle, we can see the floor perfectly, even if they can't see us." I hesitated, glancing down at my carefully chosen bridesmaid dress, a purchase that had strained my teacher's budget significantly. "I don't know." "Consider it an act of gentle rebellion," Noah suggested with a mischievous smile. "Living well is the best revenge and all that." Something shifted inside me. Why was I hiding behind a pillar, letting Lauren's cruelty determine how I experienced this day? I placed my hand in Noah's. "Lead the way, rebellion accomplice." As we moved to the edge of the dance floor, I felt a small surge of confidence. Noah was a good dancer, confident, but not showy, and as we moved together, I gradually relaxed into the moment. For the first time that day, I found myself genuinely smiling, even laughing as Noah spun me under his arm. "Look at that," Noah murmured, nodding subtly toward the head table. "Someone's not happy that you're enjoying yourself." I glanced over to find Lauren watching us, her perfect features arranged in an expression of unmistakable annoyance. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, leaning in to whisper something to Jacqueline. "Maybe she's just surprised," I suggested, though I knew better. "Maybe," Noah agreed diplomatically. "Or maybe your happiness wasn't part of today's carefully scripted events." As the song ended, Noah kept hold of my hand. "Another?" I nodded, surprising myself. Whatever this connection was, this unexpected island of authenticity in a sea of pretense, I wasn't ready for it to end. As Noah and I continued dancing, I felt myself gradually shedding the hurt and humiliation of the day. There was something liberating about moving across the floor with someone who seemed to see me, really see me, for who I was, not who I'd failed to become in my sister's estimation. We danced through 3 songs, talking and laughing, before I noticed Lauren making her way toward us, her bridal smile firmly in place, but her eyes cold with calculation. Before she could reach us, however, a distinguished older man with salt and pepper hair and Noah's same kind eyes approached and touched Noah's shoulder. "Noah," the man said, his tone polite but urgent. "A word, please." Noah's expression shifted subtly. "Madison, would you excuse me for just a moment? This is my father, Edward Bennet." Edward nodded courteously to me, but was clearly eager to speak with his son privately. As they stepped away, I found myself alone at the edge of the dance floor, suddenly aware of curious glances from other guests. Not wanting to return to my pillar prison just yet, I decided to visit the ladies' room to check my makeup. As I passed by a service corridor, I overheard raised voices. Curiosity getting the better of me, I slowed my pace. "This merger depends on public confidence, Richard. Your father and I have been planning this for months." The speaker was an older man I recognized as Richard's father, Harold Crawford. "The optics need to be perfect." "I understand the stakes," Richard replied coolly. "Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. The marriage secures the Thompson property connections we need for the downtown expansion." "And the Bennett situation?" Harold demanded. "Under control," Richard assured him. "They have no idea we're moving on the waterfront property next week. By the time they realize what's happening, the deal will be done." "Bennett's son is here," Harold hissed. "I just saw him dancing with the bride's sister." There was a pause, and when Richard spoke again, his voice had hardened. "I'll handle it. The sister is a non-issue. Lauren has made sure she's completely marginalized. As for Bennett, he's probably just doing his usual corporate espionage routine. He has no actual proof of anything." I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. This sounded nothing like post-wedding business chat, more like something from a corporate thriller. What merger were they talking about? And what did Noah have to do with it? Before I could hear more, a server rounded the corner with a tray of champagne, giving me a curious look. I smiled weakly and continued to the restroom, my mind racing. The ladies' room was blessedly empty, except for a figure hunched over the sink. To my surprise, it was Jacqueline, Lauren's replacement maid of honor. Mascara streaking down her face as she dabbed ineffectually at her eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked automatically, teacher instincts kicking in. Jacqueline looked up, momentarily startled, then let out a bitter laugh when she recognized me. "Madison. God, I'm sorry. This is so embarrassing." "What happened?" I asked, genuinely concerned, despite everything. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She fumbled in her clutch, pulling out her phone and checking it before sighing heavily. "Men are trash, you know? Even the rich ones. Especially the rich ones." She was clearly drunk, swaying slightly as she leaned against the marble counter. I handed her a fresh tissue. "Richard?" I guessed, remembering the conversation I'd just overheard. Jacqueline's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Just a hunch," I said carefully. "You two seem close." "Not close enough for him to leave her, apparently," Jacqueline muttered, then immediately looked horrified at her own admission. I froze, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "You and Richard were?" she corrected miserably. "It's been over for weeks. He promised it was just for show, this whole thing with Lauren. The engagement, the wedding, it's all business. The Crawford Group needs her family's real estate connections for some huge merger." She hiccuped. "But now he won't even answer my texts." As if on cue, her phone slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. I picked it up and couldn't help seeing the screen. A series of increasingly desperate messages to R with only curt, dismissive responses. The last visible message from him read, "This isn't the time. Focus on your role today, and we'll talk later. Delete these messages." My stomach churned as I handed the phone back. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was something much darker. "Jacqueline, does Lauren know about?" I gestured vaguely, unable to complete the sentence. "God, no," Jacqueline laughed hollowly. "She thinks she's living some fairy tale. Poor naive Lauren, with her perfect wedding and her social climbing. She has no idea she's just a pawn." She seemed to suddenly remember who she was talking to. "Shit. You're her sister. Please don't say anything. Richard would kill me." Before I could respond, the bathroom door opened and two of Lauren's friends entered, their chatter dying immediately when they spotted us. "Jackie, there you are," one exclaimed, shooting me a suspicious look. "Lauren's looking for you. It's almost time for the bouquet toss." Jacqueline straightened, switching masks so quickly it was almost impressive. "Coming," she chirped, all traces of distress hidden behind a practiced smile. As the women led her away, she glanced back at me, a silent plea in her eyes. I stood alone in the bathroom, trying to process everything I'd just learned. My sister's dream wedding was apparently a business arrangement. Her perfect husband was cheating on her with the maid of honor. And somehow Noah Bennett was connected to it all. When I returned to the reception, Noah was waiting by our table, his expression troubled. He smiled when he saw me, but I could tell something was wrong. "Everything okay with your father?" I asked. "Not exactly," he admitted. "Look, Madison, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound strange." "Try me," I said. "I've already hit my strange quota for the day." He led me to a quiet corner, away from the crowd. "I wasn't entirely honest about why I'm here today. Yes, I know Richard, but we're not friends. The Bennett Group, my family's company, is in the hotel business, just like the Crawfords. You're competitors," I realized. "More than that," Noah said grimly. "The Crawfords have been trying to take over our company for years. They've used some questionable tactics. We've been hearing rumors about a major move against us, involving some key waterfront property." I felt a chill. The merger. Noah's eyes sharpened. "What do you know about that?" "Not much," I admitted. "I overheard Richard and his father talking about a merger and mentioned your family specifically." Noah ran a hand through his hair. "I came here today to see if I could gather any information. My father thinks I'm crazy, but corporate events like this are when people get careless with secrets." He looked at me apologetically. "I never expected to meet you or get so distracted." "So this was all just corporate espionage?" I asked, trying to ignore the sting of disappointment. "No," Noah said quickly, taking my hand. "Meeting you was completely unexpected. Dancing with you, talking with you, that had nothing to do with Richard or business." I believed him, which was perhaps foolish given everything that had happened today. But there was something else I needed to tell him. "Noah, there's more. I just talked to Jacqueline, and she told me something disturbing. This wedding, my sister's wedding, is apparently part of some business arrangement. Lauren's real estate connections are valuable to the Crawfords." I swallowed hard. "And Richard has been having an affair with Jacqueline." Noah's expression darkened. "That tracks with what we've heard about the Crawfords' methods. They're not above using personal relationships to advance business interests." "My sister doesn't know," I said, the full weight of the situation hitting me. "Lauren might be superficial and cruel, but she doesn't deserve this." Noah squeezed my hand. "What do you want to do?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Did I owe Lauren the truth after how she'd treated me? Would she even believe me? And what would exposing everything mean for the Bennett's business? As I struggled with these questions, the DJ announced it was time for the bouquet toss. Across the room, Lauren stood radiant in her designer gown, smiling for the cameras, completely unaware that her perfect day, her perfect life, was built on lies. I looked at Noah, feeling an unexpected connection to this stranger, who had somehow become my ally in the midst of chaos. "I need to talk to my sister," I said finally. "She deserves to know the truth, even if she hates me for telling it." If you've ever been torn between protecting someone's happiness with a lie or hurting them with the truth, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. This wedding day had turned into so much more than family drama. It was about to become a corporate scandal, too. Stay with me, as this story takes an even more unexpected turn. If you're enjoying this crazy journey so far, hit that like button to let me know you're invested in what happens next. The bouquet toss came and went, Lauren deliberately throwing it in Jacqueline's direction while I remained hidden behind my pillar, grappling with everything I'd learned. Noah had excused himself to make a phone call, promising to return soon. I watched my sister laughing, accepting congratulations, and posing for endless photos, all while her new husband worked the room like the businessman he was. Every smile, every touch, every loving glance between them now seemed rehearsed, part of an elaborate performance with financial motivations. When Noah returned, his expression was grave. "I just spoke with our legal team. If what you overheard is accurate, the Crawfords are planning to announce a major development project next week on property they don't actually own yet, property that's critical to our expansion plans. Can they do that? Not legally, no. But they're betting on creating enough public momentum that backing out would be impossible. Classic Crawford move. Create the appearance of a done deal, then force everyone else to fall in line. I shook my head, trying to focus. But what about Lauren? Where does she fit in? The Thompson properties, Noah explained. Your sister's real estate connections. The Thompsons own key parcels adjacent to the waterfront. Without those parcels, neither our plan nor the Crawfords can move forward. And Lauren works with the Thompsons, I said slowly, remembering how proud she'd been when she'd landed their account 2 years ago. So Richard marries Lauren, gains privileged access to her client relationships, and uses that to undercut a competitor, Noah finished. I'm sorry, Madison. My mind was racing. I need to tell her. Now, before they leave for their honeymoon. Noah looked uncertain. Are you sure that's wise? She might not believe you, especially coming from me. I have to try, I insisted. Whatever issues Lauren and I have, I can't let her walk into this blindly. Taking a deep breath, I scanned the room for my sister. She was chatting with a group of well-dressed women near the cake table, her smile bright but her eyes constantly darting to see who might be watching her. I started toward her, but Noah caught my arm. I'm coming with you, he said firmly. No, I replied. This needs to be sister to sister, but thank you. I squeezed his hand before walking away. As I approached Lauren, I saw her expression shift from animated engagement to irritated recognition. She excused herself from her conversation with a practiced laugh. Madison, she said tightly, are you enjoying yourself? I see you've made a friend. We need to talk, I said quietly. In private, it's important. I'm a little busy right now, she replied dismissively. It's my wedding day, remember? Lauren, I insisted, this can't wait. Please. Something in my tone must have registered because she sighed dramatically. Fine. 5 minutes. She led me to a small anteroom off the main ballroom, closing the door behind us. What's so urgent? I took a deep breath. I know about Richard and Jacqueline. Lauren's perfectly made-up face remained impressively blank. What are you talking about? I spoke with Jacqueline in the bathroom. She was upset and drunk and admitted everything. She and Richard have been involved. She showed me their texts. Lauren laughed. A cold, sharp sound, nothing like her genuine laugh. That's ridiculous. Jacqueline is just dramatic and attention-seeking. You, of all people, should know not to believe everything you hear. Lauren, I saw the texts myself, I pressed. But that's not all. This wedding, your relationship with Richard, it's connected to some kind of business deal involving the Thompson properties. At this, Lauren's composure slipped slightly. What are you talking about? Have you been drinking? I overheard Richard and his father discussing it, I continued. They talked about a merger, about using your connections for their downtown expansion. Lauren, they're using you. Lauren's eyes narrowed dangerously. I see what this is. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're making up ridiculous stories to try to ruin my wedding day. Her voice rose. You couldn't stand that I found success, that I found someone amazing while you're still stuck in that dead-end teaching job, dumped and alone. Her words stung, but I pressed on. Lauren, think about it. How did you and Richard meet? Wasn't it at a Thompson property showing? Didn't he pursue you aggressively from the start? Because he fell in love with me, Lauren snapped, but I could see uncertainty flicker in her eyes. Maybe. Or maybe he saw an opportunity. The man I was just talking to, Noah Bennett, his family owns a rival hotel group. The Crawfords are planning something that will damage their business, and they're using your connections to do it. Lauren's face flushed with anger. So you're taking the word of some random man you just met over your own sister's happiness? That's rich, Madison. Really rich. Lauren, please? No. She cut me off. I know what this is really about. You've always resented me for being more ambitious, for wanting more than what our parents settled for. You hated that Mom recognized my potential while you were content to follow Dad's mediocre footsteps. I recoiled as if slapped. That's not true. I've always supported you, even when you became someone I barely recognized. Supported me? Lauren laughed bitterly. You've been judging me for years with your holier-than-thou teacher routine, making me feel guilty for wanting nice things, for aspiring to a better life. I never. And now, she continued, building steam. Now that I've finally built something amazing, you show up with these pathetic accusations. God, Madison, do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have you as a sister? Always dressing from discount stores, talking about finger painting and story time while I'm trying to network with important people? I deliberately pushed you away because you were embarrassing to my new social circle. The brutal honesty hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I'd told myself Lauren had changed, that she'd been corrupted by wealth and status. But what if the truth was simpler and more painful? That she'd always felt this way and just finally had the confidence to admit it. I see, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady. And is that why you seated me behind a pillar? Why you replaced me as maid of honor without warning? To minimize the embarrassment? Honestly? Lauren's eyes were cold. Yes. And because I knew you'd make today about you somehow, with your hurt feelings and your disappointment that I'm not the sister you want me to be, I knew you'd try to ruin things. And look, here you are doing exactly that. The door opened, and our mother walked in, eyes darting between us. There you are. Lauren, people are asking where you've gone. The photographer wants some family pictures. Madison is accusing Richard of marrying me for business reasons, Lauren announced, and of having an affair with Jacqueline. Mom's eyes widened before settling on me with disappointment. Madison, how could you? On your sister's wedding day? The automatic taking of Lauren's side was so predictable, it almost made me laugh. Mom, I'm trying to protect Lauren. I've heard and seen evidence from some man she just met, Lauren interjected. Some business rival of Richard's. Mom placed her arm around Lauren protectively. Madison, I think you've caused enough drama today. If you can't be supportive of your sister, maybe you should leave. You always do this, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. Lauren can do no wrong in your eyes, even when she deliberately humiliates me or treats people terribly. That's not fair, Mom started, but Lauren cut her off. It's fine, Mom. Madison's just jealous because her life hasn't worked out the way she planned. Kindergarten teacher dumped by her boyfriend. No prospects. Of course she wants to believe my happiness is fake. The door opened again, and my father entered, followed closely by Richard. Dad took in the scene with a furrowed brow. Everything okay in here? People are starting to notice you're all missing. Madison is spreading rumors about me, Richard said smoothly, having obviously overheard. Something about business deals and affairs? Quite creative. The way he said it, so dismissive, so confident, made my blood boil. It's not a rumor if it's true. I heard you and your father talking about using Lauren's connections for your merger. And Jacqueline showed me your texts. Richard's expression hardened almost imperceptibly before returning to polite concern. Madison, I understand today has been difficult for you. Being single at a wedding can stir up all sorts of emotions. But fabricating stories isn't going to make you feel better. I'm not fabricating anything, I insisted, looking to my father for support. Dad, please, you have to believe me. Dad looked uncomfortably between his daughters. Madison, are you sure you haven't misunderstood something? Richard has been nothing but good to this family. Of course she misunderstood, Lauren snapped. She's determined to ruin my happiness because she can't stand that I've succeeded where she's failed. I turned to my father, pleading. Dad, when did you ever hear me talk like this? When have I ever tried to hurt Lauren deliberately? I'm telling you what I heard and saw. For a moment, I thought I saw resolution in my father's eyes. But then Richard placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Thomas, he said with practiced familiarity, I think Madison is upset and perhaps has had too much champagne. Let's give her some space to collect herself. Lauren and I need to make our rounds before the send-off anyway. My father deflated visibly, nodding in agreement. Maybe that's best. As they all turned to leave, Richard paused by my side, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You should be more careful about the company you keep, Madison. Noah Bennett isn't the white knight you think he is. Know your place in this family and stay in it, or things could get very uncomfortable for everyone, especially your father's modest pension investments. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. I stood frozen as they filed out of the room, Lauren shooting me one last cold look before the door closed, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of failure and betrayal. I remained in the anteroom for several minutes, trying to compose myself and decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to escape the humiliation and heartbreak of this disastrous day. But something kept me rooted in place. Perhaps a stubborn refusal to give Lauren and Richard the satisfaction of driving me away, or maybe just the faint hope that someone in my family might actually listen to me. When I finally emerged, the reception was in full swing. The dance floor was packed, the alcohol was flowing freely, and the photographer was capturing carefully orchestrated moments of joy. Noah was waiting near the door, concern evident in his expression. "That bad?" he asked, noting my red eyes and trembling hands. "Worse," I admitted. They didn't believe me. No one did. I recounted the confrontation briefly, including Richard's thinly veiled threat. Noah's jaw tightened. "That's the Crawford playbook. Discredit, dismiss, and when that fails, threaten." "I should just leave," I said, suddenly exhausted. "There's nothing more I can do here except make a scene and further convince everyone. I'm the unstable, jealous sister." Noah considered this, then nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right. Not because you deserve to be pushed out, but because sometimes leaving with your dignity intact is the strongest statement you can make." He offered his arm. "I'll walk you out." As we made our way across the ballroom toward the exit, I caught glimpses of my sister laughing with her in-laws, my mother proudly accepting compliments from guests, and my father standing awkwardly at the edge of a conversation, nursing a whiskey. None of them looked in my direction. It was as if I had already ceased to exist in their world. We were almost to the door when a commotion erupted near the head table. Jacqueline, visibly intoxicated now, had climbed onto a chair, champagne glass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced loudly, her words slurring slightly, "to the beautiful bride and her devoted groom." The room quieted, guests turning toward the unexpected speech. Lauren's face was frozen in a smile that didn't reach her eyes, while Richard moved quickly toward Jacqueline, his expression thunderous. "To Lauren," Jacqueline continued, raising her glass higher. "Who got the ring but not the man?" A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Richard reached Jacqueline and attempted to guide her down from the chair, but she shook him off. "Don't touch me," she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You've done enough touching for one lifetime, Richard. Or should I show everyone the texts?" Richard's face paled as he glanced around at the watching crowd. "Jacqueline is clearly unwell," he announced smoothly. "Too much champagne, I'm afraid." "I'm not unwell," Jacqueline insisted, fumbling with her phone. "I'm just tired of the lies. Do you want to see?" she asked the nearest table of wide-eyed guests. "Do you want to see what the groom was sending me last night, while having his rehearsal dinner with his bride?" Lauren had rushed over now, her bridal gown swishing as she grabbed Jacqueline's arm. "Stop it," she demanded through clenched teeth. "You're making a fool of yourself." "I'm making a fool of myself?" Jacqueline laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you, Lauren. The perfect bride with her perfect wedding, who has no idea her husband has been sleeping with me for months. Who has no idea this whole marriage is just a business arrangement to get access to your client properties." The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the unfolding drama, guests frozen with drinks halfway to their lips, the band members exchanging uncomfortable glances. "Madison put you up to this, didn't she?" Lauren accused, her voice shrill. "This is her pathetic attempt to ruin my day." At the sound of my name, heads turned in my direction. I stood paralyzed near the exit with Noah, caught in the spotlight of sudden attention. "Madison?" Jacqueline frowned, confused. "No. Madison tried to help me in the bathroom. She's the only person who's been decent to me today." She waved her phone unsteadily. "The truth is right here. Want to see, Lauren? Want to see what your husband really thinks of you? How he laughs about your desperation to be accepted in his social circle?" Richard's father had joined them now, along with several other Crawford family members trying to contain the situation. but the damage was done. Guests were whispering, phones were discreetly recording, and the perfect veneer of the day had cracked irreparably. My father suddenly appeared at my side, his face ashen. "Did you know about this?" he asked quietly. "I tried to tell you," I replied. "All of you. No one would listen." Before my father could respond, Lauren's voice cut through the murmurs. "This is all your fault!" she shrieked, pointing directly at me. "You couldn't stand to see me happy, so you orchestrated this whole scene. You probably put Jacqueline up to this." "That's enough, Lauren," my father said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. Every head turned to him in surprise as he stepped forward. "Madison tried to warn us privately. She came to you out of concern, and you dismissed her. We all did." Lauren stared at him in shock. "You're taking her side? Now?" "This isn't about sides," my father continued, moving toward the center of the room. "This is about the truth. And if what Jacqueline is saying is true, if this marriage was arranged for business purposes, then you deserve better, Lauren." Richard's father stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage the situation. "Thomas, this is hardly the time or place for family disagreements. Why don't we all take a moment to—" "I think it's exactly the time," interrupted an authoritative voice. Noah's father, Edward Bennett, had joined the fray, his expression grave. "Especially if this marriage is connected to your company's attempt to fraudulently announce developments on property you don't own." The room erupted in confused chatter. Richard's father blanched visibly, while Richard himself maintained a stone-faced composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Bennett," Harold Crawford said stiffly, "but this is a private family celebration that you were barely invited to. I suggest you leave." "Gladly," Edward replied. "But first, I think the bride deserves to know that her new father-in-law and husband have been in contact with her for over a year, long before she coincidentally met Richard. They specifically targeted her because of her professional connections to the Thompson properties." Lauren's face drained of color as she looked between Richard and his father. "What is he talking about?" "Richard, we met at the charity gala. It was coincidence." Richard's silence was damning. Harold Crawford attempted damage control. "Lauren, dear, this is just business talk that's being mischaracterized. Of course Richard loves you." My mother had pushed her way through the crowd, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide her distress. "What's happening? Lauren? Richard?" "Ask them, Mom," I said quietly. "Ask them if they knew each other before the chance meeting at the gala. Ask them why Richard's father has Lauren's professional profile from 2 years ago." "How would you know that?" Richard snapped, immediately realizing his mistake. "I don't," I admitted. "But you just confirmed it." The room had become a theater in the round, with the Crawford and Wallace families at the center of a circle of gawking guests. Jacqueline had slumped into a chair, her momentary bravery fading as she began to cry quietly. Lauren stood rigid, her perfect posture finally breaking as the weight of revelations pressed down on her. "Is it true?" she asked Richard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was any of it real?" Richard glanced at his father, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. When Richard turned back to Lauren, his expression had changed entirely. The loving groom replaced by a calculating businessman. "The merger is what matters here," he said coldly. "Your emotional state is secondary. Pull yourself together, and we can discuss this privately later." Lauren recoiled as if she'd been slapped. For the first time, I saw my sister's carefully constructed world crumble visibly. In that moment, despite everything, my heart ached for her. "You bastard," my father growled, stepping toward Richard with clenched fists. My mother grabbed his arm, holding him back. "Not like this, Thomas," she urged. "Not here." Richard straightened his tie, surveying the chaos with detached interest. "I think the festivities have reached their natural conclusion," he announced to the room. "Thank you all for coming." As if this were the signal they'd been waiting for, the Crawford family closed ranks, efficiently clearing the room of stunned guests, while Richard conferred quietly with his lawyers in a corner. Lauren stood abandoned in the middle of the dance floor, her elaborate gown suddenly seeming like a costume in a play that had ended abruptly. Noah touched my elbow gently. "We should go," he murmured. "This is going to get uglier before it gets better." I hesitated, looking at my sister standing alone. Despite everything, I couldn't just leave her there. "Give me a minute," I said to Noah, then walked slowly toward Lauren. She looked up as I approached, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. "Happy now?" she asked, but the usual bite was missing from her voice. She just sounded tired. "No," I said honestly. "I'm not happy at all, Lauren. I never wanted this for you." For a long moment, we stood in silence amid the wreckage of her wedding. Then, to my surprise, she reached out and gripped my hand tightly. No words, just contact, the first genuine connection between us in years. After a moment, our mother joined us, placing an arm around each of her daughters. Our father stood nearby, watching Richard and the Crawfords with undisguised contempt as they continued their efficient damage control. "Let's go home," Mom said softly, leading Lauren toward the exit. As they passed Noah, Mom paused. "Thank you," she said simply. Noah nodded, then turned to me. "Are you coming?" I glanced back at the chaos of the abandoned reception, the half-eaten cake, the discarded champagne glasses, the wilting floral arrangements that had cost more than 3 months of my salary. The perfect wedding reduced to debris. "Yes," I said, taking Noah's offered hand. "Let's get out of here." As we quietly slipped away from the shattered celebration, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. For my family, for Lauren's future, for the tentative connection forming between Noah and me. One thing was certain. The pillar that had hidden me from view had crumbled, exposing truths that none of us could ignore any longer. The days following Lauren's wedding were a blur of family crisis management and legal consultations. The Crawford family's efficient PR machine had already begun spinning the failed reception as an unfortunate misunderstanding exacerbated by an emotionally unstable family member, me, presumably. Lauren and Richard were reported to be taking time to themselves after the joyous occasion, their honeymoon to Bora Bora mysteriously postponed. I returned to my kindergarten classroom on Monday morning, trying to lose myself in the innocent chaos of 5-year-olds learning to write their names and share toys. But even there, the whispers followed me. Several parents had connections to guests at the wedding, and rumors spread quickly in our small community. "Miss Wallace, are you a princess?" asked Lily, one of my students, as she colored a picture of what appeared to be a woman in a large triangle. "No, sweetie. I'm just a regular person," I replied, kneeling beside a hair desk. "But Tommy said you were at a princess party, and there was a big fight with the evil king," she insisted, pointing to a boy diligently constructing a tower of blocks. I sighed. Apparently, the wedding drama had filtered down even to kindergarten gossip. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements too," I explained gently. "But that doesn't make anyone a princess or an evil king." As I guided my students through their day, my phone buzzed repeatedly in my desk drawer with messages from Noah, my parents, and even a few curious friends who'd heard rumors. I ignored them all until dismissal time, focusing instead on the refreshingly straightforward world of childhood, where the biggest crisis was a broken crayon or a misplaced lunchbox. Once the last child had been collected, I finally checked my phone. Among the many messages was a simple text from Noah. "Coffee? No pressure, just checking in." We'd exchanged numbers as we left the wedding reception, but I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the message. I replied with the name of a quiet cafe near my school and a time. An hour later, I sat across from Noah at a corner table, both of us cradling mugs of steaming coffee like shields against the lingering chill of the wedding disaster. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his eyes warm with genuine concern. "Honestly, I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me feels vindicated that the truth came out, but another part feels terrible for Lauren. She may have treated me badly, but she didn't deserve this public humiliation." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "The Crawfords have a talent for leaving destruction in their wake. My father's legal team has been working overtime to prevent them from moving forward with the fraudulent property announcements. Has there been any fallout for your family business?" "Nothing we can't handle," he assured me. "If anything, this has strengthened our position. Several investors who were wavering have recommitted to our project now that the Crawfords' tactics have been exposed." "At least something good came of it," I said, staring into my coffee. Have you spoken with your sister? Noah asked gently. I shook my head. She's not taking my calls. My mom says she's staying at their house and barely leaves her old bedroom. I felt a pang of guilt despite myself. Apparently, the marriage is already being annulled. The Crawfords' lawyers are working overtime to keep the real reasons quiet. And your parents? Dad's been amazing, actually. I think seeing Lauren betrayed like that woke something up in him. He's finally standing up to Mom about her favoritism. I smiled sadly. He called me every day this week just to check in. It's more attention than I've gotten from him in years. And your mom? Still processing. She's torn between defending Lauren and acknowledging that I was right all along. I traced the rim of my mug with my finger. I think she's realizing how much damage her favoritism has caused. But old habits die hard. Noah reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I'm sorry this has been so difficult. Family wounds are the deepest kind. The warmth of his touch was comforting in a way I hadn't expected. What about you and your father? You mentioned you have your differences. Noah smiled ruefully. We do. He's old school business, profit margins and expansion. I'm more interested in sustainable development and community impact. We clash constantly about the direction of the company. He shrugged. But at the end of the day, we respect each other. That's the difference, I think. Respect has to be the foundation, even when you disagree. His words resonated deeply. Respect was exactly what had been missing in my relationship with Lauren and my mother for years. Over the following weeks, Noah and I continued to meet. For coffee, for walks in the park, for quiet dinners at out-of-the-way restaurants where we wouldn't run into anyone connected to the wedding disaster. There was an ease between us that I hadn't experienced with anyone before, a sense that I could be fully myself without judgment or expectation. A week after the wedding, I received a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. You tried to warn her. She didn't deserve your loyalty. Jacqueline. 2 days later, Lauren finally called. The conversation was brief and strained. You've ruined my life, she said without preamble. Everyone's talking about me. My career is in shambles. The Thompsons have pulled their accounts. I didn't ruin your life, Lauren, I replied calmly. Richard and his family did that. I tried to warn you privately. If you hadn't brought that Bennett man to the wedding, Noah came on his own, I interrupted. And thank goodness he did. Or you might still be married to someone who was using you for business connections. There was a long silence before Lauren spoke again, her voice smaller. Was any of it real? Did he ever actually care about me? The vulnerability in her question broke my heart. Despite everything, she was still my sister, the girl who had held my hand during thunderstorms and taught me how to braid my hair. I don't know, Lauren, I answered honestly. But you deserve someone who loves you for yourself, not for your client list. She hung up without saying goodbye. But it was a start. The first honest conversation we'd had in years, even if it was painful. My mother called later that same day, her voice tight with restraint. Your sister is struggling, she said, as if it were somehow my responsibility. I know, Mom. I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry the truth came out. You could have handled it differently, she insisted. I tried to, I reminded her. I came to Lauren privately first. I came to you and Dad. None of you would listen. The silence on the line stretched uncomfortably before she sighed. Your father wants to have dinner this weekend. Just the 4 of us. To talk things through. It was more an order than an invitation, but I agreed nonetheless. Perhaps it was time for a real family reckoning. That dinner was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. 4 people sitting around my parents' dining table, the weight of unspoken resentments and fresh wounds making the air thick and difficult to breathe. Lauren barely looked at me, pushing food around her plate without eating. My mother maintained a stream of meaningless chatter about neighbors and relatives, while my father watched us all with sad, tired eyes. Finally, after my mother's 3rd attempt to discuss her garden club, Dad set down his fork with a decisive click. Enough, he said firmly. We're not here to talk about Mrs. Peterson's hydrangeas. We're here because this family is broken, and it has been for a long time. Mom looked startled. Thomas, I don't think— No, Diane, it's time we all spoke honestly, he insisted. I've spent years watching you favor Lauren over Madison, making excuses for Lauren's behavior while holding Madison to impossible standards. I said nothing because I thought it would pass, that you'd eventually see how destructive it was. That was my failure as a father and a husband. Lauren's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Mom doesn't favor me. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. Lauren, she's been favoring you our entire lives. Why do you think you got away with treating me like garbage for years? Why do you think she took your side instantly at the wedding when I tried to warn you about Richard? That's not fair, Mom protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Dad asked quietly. When was the last time you praised Madison for her work? When was the last time you bragged about her to your friends the way you constantly talked about Lauren's sales figures and social connections? Mom's face crumpled, tears filling her eyes. I just wanted both my girls to succeed. Lauren needed more encouragement to reach her potential. Madison was always so content. Content isn't the same as underachieving, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I love my job. I'm good at it. I make a difference in children's lives every day. The fact that you can't see that as success is your limitation, not mine. Lauren stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Is that really how you feel? That Mom favors me and Dad favors you? Dad doesn't favor me, I corrected. He just sees me. He values what I do even though it doesn't come with prestige or wealth. Mom has never been able to do that. The conversation that followed was raw and painful, with decades of hurt feelings and misunderstandings laid bare. There were tears, accusations, defenses, and eventually, exhausted truths. We ended the evening with no neat resolution, no group hug or magical healing, but with something perhaps more valuable, the beginning of honesty. As I drove home that night, I called Noah and asked if he'd meet me for a late drink. I needed to process everything with someone who hadn't been shaped by the same family dynamic, someone who saw me clearly without the distortion of history. Family therapy, my father announced a week later, after a second, slightly less disastrous family dinner. I've made appointments for all of us, together and individually. Lauren rolled her eyes but didn't refuse. Mom looked terrified at the prospect of examining her parenting with a professional. I felt a cautious hope that perhaps real healing might be possible. Our first session was as awkward and difficult as expected, with the therapist, a calm, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Winters, skillfully navigating our family's tangled web of resentments and expectations. Lauren cried when confronted with the impact of her behavior on me. Mom became defensive when her favoritism was highlighted. Dad apologized repeatedly for his passivity. I struggled to articulate years of hurt without sounding like I was seeking revenge. This isn't about assigning blame, Dr. Winters reminded us. It's about understanding patterns so we can change them. Every person in this room has contributed to the dynamic, and every person has the power to help heal it. Slowly, painfully, we began the process of reconstruction. Lauren and I started meeting for coffee once a week. Awkward encounters at first, filled with careful small talk and strategic avoidance of difficult topics. But gradually, tentatively, we found our way back to moments of genuine connection. She asked about my students. I inquired about her career reorganization after the Thompson account loss. I'm thinking of starting my own boutique agency, she admitted during our fifth coffee date, focusing on sustainable development rather than luxury properties. That sounds amazing, I said, genuinely impressed. Is that something you've always been interested in? Not exactly, she smiled ruefully. But this whole experience has made me reevaluate what actually matters to me versus what I thought should matter. She traced the lid of her coffee cup. Noah's father offered me a consulting position with their company. Did you know that? I shook my head, surprised. Noah never mentioned it. I turned it down, Lauren continued. It felt too much like trading one controlling situation for another. But Edward Bennett has been surprisingly supportive of my independent venture. He's even referring some clients my way. That's wonderful, I said, meaning it. You've always been brilliant at what you do, Lauren. It was just the why that needed examining. She looked up at me, her expression vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since we were young. I've been terrible to you, Madison. For years. I don't know if I can ever make that right. We can't change the past, I acknowledged. But we can build something different going forward, something better. Meanwhile, my relationship with Noah deepened with each passing week. We took things slowly, both of us cautious after our respective family complexities, but the connection between us was undeniable. He came to my classroom to help build bookshelves for my reading corner. I attended a community presentation where he showcased his latest sustainable architecture project. We talked about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, our favorite ice cream flavors, our deepest fears. 3 months after the disastrous wedding, Noah invited me to dinner at his apartment. He cooked a surprisingly elaborate meal, complete with candles and my favorite wine. As we sat on his balcony watching the sunset, he took my hand. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically nervous. We met in the strangest possible way, under the worst possible circumstances. Being hidden behind a pillar at my sister's fraudulent wedding wasn't exactly a meet-cute from a romance novel. I agreed with a smile. "And yet," he continued, "finding you that day feels like the most fortunate accident of my life." He squeezed my hand. "I don't want to rush this, Madison. We both have complicated families and personal histories to navigate. But I want you to know that I'm all in. Whatever pace we set, whatever challenges come our way." The simple sincerity of his words moved me deeply. "I'm all in too," I told him, leaning forward to kiss him gently. Pillars and all. 6 months after that fateful wedding day, the Wallace family gathered again, this time for a small, intimate dinner at my apartment to celebrate my birthday. Lauren brought a beautiful homemade cake, having discovered a passion for baking during her therapy journey. Mom arrived with a thoughtfully chosen book on progressive early childhood education rather than her usual generic gift card. Dad beamed with pride as he helped me set the table, asking detailed questions about my latest classroom projects. And Noah, now officially my boyfriend, moved comfortably among my family members, the initial awkwardness of his connection to the wedding scandal long since faded. When my father raised a toast to new beginnings and honest relationships, the 5 of us clinked glasses in genuine celebration. Later that evening, after my family had departed and Noah and I were cleaning up, he paused with a dish towel in hand. "You know what I was just thinking?" "What's that?" I asked, rinsing the last wineglass. "If you hadn't been seated behind that pillar at Lauren's wedding, if you hadn't been treated so poorly that day, we might never have met." He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes." I turned in his embrace, considering his words. "I wouldn't wish that day on anyone," I said honestly, "but I can't regret where it led." As I looked into the eyes of this kind, principled man who had seen me clearly from the first moment, who had valued me exactly as I was without conditions or comparisons, I realized that sometimes family is what you're born into, and sometimes it's what you find when you're brave enough to reach out from behind the pillars that hide you from view. 6 months turned into a year, and gradually the wedding disaster faded from local gossip into an occasional remember when reference. Lauren's boutique real estate agency, focusing on sustainable development, was gaining traction, attracting clients who valued ethical business practices over ostentatious displays of wealth. My mother had started volunteering at my school, reading to the kindergartners once a week, her way of finally engaging with my world. Dad retired from teaching and began writing the historical novel he'd been planning for decades, his newfound assertiveness extending to his long-deferred personal dreams. And Noah and we built something beautiful together, one honest conversation at a time. Our relationship deepened through holiday gatherings, weekend getaways, and ordinary Tuesday nights grading papers and reviewing building plans side by side on my couch. We moved at our own pace, neither rushing nor dragging our feet, allowing trust to develop naturally after we'd both seen how easily relationships could be corrupted by ulterior motives. On a crisp fall morning, almost exactly a year after we met, Noah appeared unexpectedly at my classroom door during my lunch break, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "What are you doing here?" I asked, pleasantly surprised. "I thought you had meetings all day." "I rescheduled," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I had something more important to do." Before I could question him further, he stepped fully into the room, revealing a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. Behind him came my entire class of kindergartners, returning early from lunch with my teaching assistant, each child solemnly carrying a single flower. "Miss Wallace," announced Emma, my most theatrical student, "we have a very important question." The children arranged themselves in a semicircle, their faces alight with the joy of being co-conspirators in an adult surprise. Noah knelt down in the center of my colorful classroom rug, the same spot where I gathered my students each morning for story time. "Madison," he began, his voice steady but threaded with emotion, "I fell in love with you in the midst of chaos, when you were fighting to be seen and heard by the people who should have valued you most. I watched you stand up for the truth even when it cost you personally. I've seen your compassion, your integrity, and your strength every day since." My hand flew to my mouth as I realized what was happening. The children giggled excitedly, several bouncing on their toes in anticipation. I knew I wanted to propose in this classroom, because this is where you do your most important work, shaping little minds and hearts with the same care and attention you've shown me. Noah reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. "Madison Wallace, will you marry me?" "Say yes, Miss Wallace," shouted Jaden from the back of the group, unable to contain himself. The other children erupted in agreement, their small faces earnest and expectant. Through happy tears, I nodded. "Yes," I managed. "Absolutely yes." The classroom exploded in cheers as Noah slipped the ring onto my finger, a delicate emerald surrounded by small diamonds, nothing like the ostentatious rock Richard had given Lauren. It was thoughtful, unique, and perfectly suited to my taste and lifestyle, just like the man who had chosen it. My teaching assistant appeared with cupcakes for the children, who were now dancing around us in celebration. As the sugar-fueled excitement escalated, Noah whispered in my ear, "There's more. Your family is waiting at Riverside Park for a small engagement picnic. Lauren helped organize it." "Lauren did?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "She's been my co-conspirator in planning all this. She wanted to be part of making this day special for you." 2 hours later, after my students had been dismissed with strict instructions to keep the surprise, until I could tell my family myself a futile request, I knew the news would spread through parent text chains within minutes. Noah and I arrived at the park to find my family waiting under the old oak tree where my father had taught me to fly a kite as a child. Lauren rushed forward first, enveloping me in a tight hug. "Let me see it," she demanded, grabbing my hand to examine the ring. "It's perfect, Noah, just like we discussed." She beamed at me. "I may have helped with the selection process." "Don't worry, I only guided, didn't dictate." "It's beautiful," I assured them both. "I love it." My parents approached next, my mother wiping away tears, and my father grinning broadly. "My little girl," Mom said, embracing me. "I'm so happy for you." "We both are," Dad added, clapping Noah on the shoulder. "You're getting a good one here, son." "I know," Noah replied simply, squeezing my hand. The afternoon unfolded in gentle celebration. Nothing like the extravagant production of Lauren's wedding, but perfect in its authenticity. We shared champagne and finger foods, told stories, and simply enjoyed being together as a family that was still healing but committed to the process. As the sun began to set, Lauren pulled me aside, linking her arm through mine as we walked a short distance from the others. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this," she said, handing me a small gift bag. It seemed fitting today. Inside was a delicate silver frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before, Lauren and me as children, building a sandcastle at the beach. We were leaning toward each other, focused intently on our creation, our small faces alight with shared purpose. "Dad found it when he was going through old albums," Lauren explained. "It reminded me of who we used to be to each other, who I hope we can be again." I traced the edge of the frame, emotion tightening my throat. "We're getting there," I said softly. I've been doing a lot of thinking in therapy, Lauren continued, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain, about why I treated you the way I did for so long. It wasn't just Mom's favoritism, though that played a part. She took a deep breath. I was jealous of you, Madison. Jealous? I echoed, genuinely surprised. Of what? Of your certainty. Your contentment. You always seemed to know exactly who you were and what would make you happy. I spent years chasing validation, trying to fill this emptiness with achievements and status and the right relationships. She laughed sadly. And look how that turned out. You're finding your way now, I reminded her. On your own terms. I am, she agreed. And it feels real, in a way nothing has for a long time. She gestured toward Noah, who was chatting animatedly with our father. He's the real deal, you know. The way he looks at you, like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met. He is, I confirmed, warmth spreading through me at the observation. I want that someday, Lauren admitted. Not right now. I've got a lot more work to do on myself first. But someday, I want what you two have. You'll find it, I assured her. When you're ready, she squeezed my arm. In the meantime, I call dibs on maid of honor. And I promise not to make you sit behind a pillar at the reception. We both laughed, the sound carrying across the park to where our family waited. Noah looked over questioningly, and I gave him a reassuring smile. This moment with my sister felt precious, fragile but hopeful, like the first green shoot after a long winter. Deal, I agreed. But I'm picking the bridesmaid dresses. God, yes, Lauren groaned. I still have nightmares about that seafoam monstrosity Jacqueline chose. When Noah proposed having a small engagement dinner the following weekend, rather than a large party, I readily agreed. We invited only our closest friends and family to an intimate gathering at his favorite local restaurant. To my surprise, Edward Bennett made a touching speech that brought tears to my eyes. When my son told me he'd met someone special at what was arguably the most disastrous wedding of the year, I was skeptical, he admitted with a wry smile. But Madison has proven to be not just the woman who captured Noah's heart, but someone who has earned my deepest respect as well. She stood up for the truth when it would have been easier to remain silent. She prioritized her sister's well-being over her own vindication, and she has approached our family's complicated business history with grace and understanding. He raised his glass. To Madison and Noah, may your marriage be built on the honesty and integrity that brought you together. As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Lauren's eye. She smiled at me, a real smile, without the calculated social brilliance she'd perfected over the years. Just my sister, genuinely happy for me. When Noah and I began planning our wedding, we agreed immediately that it would be small, meaningful, and completely authentic to who we were. No status symbols, no social climbing, no pretense. We chose a local botanical garden for the ceremony and a favorite restaurant for the reception. Lauren threw herself into helping with details, careful to offer suggestions rather than commands, always deferring to our preferences. My mother struggled initially with the simplicity of our plans. But what about the Crawford Club? She suggested during an early planning session. They have that beautiful ballroom. Mom, Lauren interrupted gently. I think we've all had enough of the Crawford Club, don't you? Mom had the grace to look embarrassed. You're right, of course. I just want Madison's day to be special. It will be, I assured her, because it will be real. As our wedding day approached, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had led us here. If Lauren hadn't seated me behind that pillar, if Noah hadn't noticed and reached out, if Jacqueline hadn't created a scene at the reception, would we have found each other anyway? Were we always destined to connect? Or was our love truly born from the ashes of my sister's disastrous wedding day? I decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that when the worst happened, when I was literally and figuratively pushed to the sidelines of my own family, I found the strength to reach out and accept the hand of a stranger. What mattered was that the painful exposure of truth had ultimately freed everyone involved. Lauren from a fraudulent marriage, my parents from their dysfunctional family dynamic, Noah's family from the Crawfords' business manipulation, and me from years of accepting less than I deserved. The night before our wedding, Noah and I took a quiet walk through the botanical garden where we would exchange vows the next day. The pathways were lined with twinkling lights, the air fragrant with jasmine and roses. We stopped beside a small reflecting pool, our joined hands swinging gently between us. "Any last-minute jitters?" Noah asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they did when he was truly happy. "Not a single one," I replied honestly. "You? None," he confirmed. "Just impatience to start our life together officially." I leaned against his shoulder, watching our reflection in the still water. "You know, for years I measured myself against Lauren, and always came up short in my mother's eyes. I accepted being relegated to the background, literally put behind a pillar at her wedding." Noah squeezed my hand. "And now? Now I know that being pushed aside that day was actually the moment I began to find my voice. It led me to you, yes. But more importantly, it forced me to stand up for myself and for the truth." I turned to face him fully. "I'm not in anyone's shadow anymore." "You never were," Noah said softly. "Some people just weren't standing in the right light to see you clearly." The next day, as I walked down the aisle toward Noah, I saw my family watching with tear-filled eyes, my father radiating pride, my mother finally seeing me fully, and Lauren standing as my maid of honor, her face reflecting genuine joy for my happiness. The journey that had brought us to this moment had been painful and messy, but also necessary and ultimately healing. Noah took my hands as I reached him, his eyes filled with a love so clear and uncomplicated that it took my breath away. "Ready?" he whispered. "Absolutely," I replied, stepping forward into the light. I can't believe it's been 5 years since that fateful wedding day when I was seated behind a pillar, feeling invisible and unwanted. Looking back now, I realize how that painful moment became the catalyst for the most authentic chapter of my life. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about moments when painful family dynamics ultimately led to your own growth or healing. Drop a comment below, sharing your experience. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength through family challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember that sometimes being pushed aside is just the universe making room for something better to enter your life.